Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm so excited to be here. So thank you to the founders at Black Women Talk Tech for having me here today to speak on this. My name is Tawny Chambers. I'm the founder of SaviMoni. At SaviMoni, we help self-employed entrepreneurs maximize their tax savings and organize their finances in one place. We give them access to vetted financial professionals, resources, and a software tool that helps them keep everything together, because when you're self-employed, the personal and the business lines get blurred often. So I've been an entrepreneur and founder for 20 years. Happy to also be the Black Women Talk Tech's New York lead chapter founder, so as well.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is Tonya Williams. I'm SoftBank, which is not a bank, not a Chinese bank, as we have to tell folks often. But we are a company that invests in portfolio companies around the world that are engaged in emerging technologies or utilizing emerging technologies, mostly AI and machine learning. And I actually work in the Washington office, which is a new office, new concept at SoftBank, in which they decided that in addition to money, what they wanted to offer the portfolio company information and access to government, to talk about the workings of government and how they should engage with government, things they should be thinking about in terms of government that they may not be, as you all well know, because you're trying to run your business. So we do a lot of work there. Also, since SoftBank is headquartered in Japan, we do a lot of technical work, which involves national security. So all of our investments go through CFIUS review, which is a huge and ardent process that looks at whether or not your investment in a company could have a negative effect on U.S. national security. And I've worked in government for a number of years, very different levels, state government, international, most recently at the White House, where I was the Director of Legislative Affairs for Vice President Joe Biden.
Hi, my name is Carmencita Whonder. I too would like to thank the founders of Black Women Talk Tech for having me here today. I am excited to be able to just share whatever knowledge that I've been able to gather over the last 7 weeks. I am a founder of a luxury ready-to-wear brand by the name of Whonder. It is a size-inclusive brand focused on serving women sizes 0 to 24. That is what I'm most passionate about at this point, but I also have had a long career in politics and worked in Washington for close to 20 years. Where I am still a partner on a part-time basis at the law firm Brownstein Hyatt Farber and Schreck. We are also the second largest lobbying firm in the United States. And so it's been a real honor to be able to really look at the financial issues that entrepreneurs like myself are facing as I embark on trying to figure out, negotiating solutions with Congress and the administration. And so I've spent the last 7 weeks really trying to figure out what, programs or tax incentives are available. And prior to working as a lobbyist, I too have worked on Capitol Hill and spent years working for Senator Chuck Schumer, who's the current Democratic leader, serving as his chief banking commodity securities advisor.
Thank you, ladies. I've been troubleshooting in the back with Ade, and he should be here shortly. But he had his first question for Tonya would be, what is the latest CARE Act provision, and what does it mean for Black founders? If you could start answering that question, please, and thank you.
Sure. Well, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that just happened within the last 2 hours. The House just dropped a $3 trillion bill that has lots of different provisions that we've only had a chance to skim. It's 1,800 pages. So we'll have to get back to you on that. But largely speaking, what's happened is the federal government response has been unprecedented. It's been the largest response in the history of the country, $3 trillion in stimulus and aid. And that all happened despite the fact that they were working from home because of social distancing in a hyper-partisan atmosphere, and with, to be generous, a very unpredictable president managing the federal effort. So it's very impressive, but it's come with a couple of bumps. What's happened is that because Congress was trying to move fast so that they could get money out and so that they could scale, they used some existing disaster recovery programs through loan programs through the SBA that had problems for minority borrowers previously during the Great Recession, and that's been compounded by the circumstances now that I'm sure you are all too familiar with, which include relying on traditional lending institutions to distribute the funds, and those folks actually going to existing customers first, which deprioritized many African-American business owners. But that being said, the question that I was asked is, what's in it for Black founders who are uniquely challenged by historic underinvestment and barriers to funding, and that are exacerbated, conditions that are exacerbated during a severe economic shock such as this. So some of the relevant provisions that are common, that address common challenges that Black female founders may be facing there was some targeted tax relief, which is a good thing, trying to keep money in the pockets of individuals. There was enhanced and expanded unemployment insurance benefits. They made it available to sole proprietors, folks involved in the gig economy, trying to reach more people and also address the different types of work and different makeup of businesses across the board, really trying to get at small businesses. We talk a little bit more about what exactly their definition of small is, something they're trying to work out and revamp. But the provisions also included some debt relief, mortgages, student loans, other things, again, that affect founders who get their funding from non-traditional sources. And then it's hard to keep up with sometimes. There have been 4 tranches, but in the last tranche, there was actually $60 billion set aside for underserved populations that there is hope that it will get out to using targeted funds as a way of making sure that institutions that have relationships with and that minority borrowers traditionally go to are able to make loans from. So that hasn't actually worked out in the way that was intended. As you may have seen, there was an IG report this past weekend in which that was revealed that the Small Business Administration had not been acting in accordance with congressional guidance. They had not given out guidance to prioritize minority and underserved lenders as intended. They had not been collecting data that would allow for any sort of check on that distribution. And they actually made some recommendations that are positive, and hopefully will actually be some progress there. So a number of problems that burden borrowers, but some really good things as well. I think that they certainly, having gone through this process through the Great Recession, there were some lessons learned. The reason that we have the transparency that led to the IG report, the timeliness of the IG report, is because of what was experienced during that time. And I think there's been really, and others can speak to this too, really a bipartisan consensus around the fact that this money was intended for small business owners, and truly small business owners, not the folks that you have seen that through some technical definitions qualify for small business. And so they're really trying and talking now about proposals that actually are targeting small businesses, 10 or less people, 25 or less people. And they're was a report as well this weekend that came out that actually specifically highlights and identifies women and minority-owned businesses as the economic engine of this country, and the fact that they are really, really need to get money to them because they are in fact the most vulnerable and most likely to fail within the first 5 years. So that was really good to see. And we'll have to really see what happens now. Unfortunately, the foot's been taken off the gas with regard to policy.
Right. So, right. And apologies for being a little late. I'm an avid Safari user, so I had to switch over to Chrome, but it's definitely great to join this conversation and very honored to be here. And also want to thank the Black Women Talk Tech team for curating this this dialogue. So Tani, that's a great framing, and it's really good timing, because I think NPR this morning had a conversation exactly about that, and how a lot of our companies, as Catherine had mentioned, you had mentioned, weren't getting access to it from previous relationships, et cetera. But it's really good to know that not only is there round 2 coming, but we'd love to, in further conversation, get a little bit deeper into how somebody would approach it, if it's right for them. But I think one of the questions that would be, great to give some clarity on are, what are some other options besides SBA loans, any other programs or initiatives that founders could benefit from in terms of helping their business? So if Tani, would you be interested in jumping in?
Sure. As far as other programs and alternative funding, to my knowledge, there are a lot of grants that are being offered right now and continually, just like Black Women Talk Tech is now raising a fund as well. There are a lot of grant programs and resources from larger companies that are being offered. You can look into them. They too, just like the SBA loans, are the monies are being depleted very quickly, so we need to act quickly. But they are still rolling in that sense of it. As far as other alternative things to look towards, I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, about things that are actually in the CARES Act that we can actually look into. But those are some of the resources. There are grants that are available right now that you can look into from private companies. Yeah, that's what I know so far. Maybe the other ladies can pitch in on that particular question.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the attention has been on the PPP loan, and for good reason, because for all intents and purposes, if you use the money properly, it's free money. So that's why that program is really important, particularly for us. And obviously, if you need to use the money for other reasons beyond payroll, it's a very, it's pretty good terms, 1% interest rate, you have 2 years to pay it back. Obviously, a lot of people focused on the EIDL loans, the economic injury disaster loans. That money went very quickly. It's finished, and only ag companies are able to access those funds now. That program obviously comes with a $10,000, potentially up to $10,000 grant program, and then you can apply for additional loan monies. Again, if you have an ag business, or maybe you have some sort of ag platform, you should look at that money, but for everyone else, it's gone. So I think Tani's correct that one of the most important things is that as soon as these things are announced, we have to try to get to the front of the line. I think it's also important that depending on your industry, that you look at agency money. That means the departments within the government. So that's going after, if you have a healthcare platform, look at Department of Health and Human Services. Again, if you have an ag business, go after the Department of Agriculture money, because in these bills, there was money given not only for like the PPP and EIDL programs, but they were also going after specific industries. And so I think depending on what industry you're in, you should begin to look at those agencies that would have some sort of jurisdiction over your business. And then I think one thing that may be a little overlooked in a lot of the conversations I've seen are how some of the tax provisions can help you. Some of the tax provisions are refundable, and the IRS would have to write you a check today. So I just think that it's not just PPP loan money, even though I would say that's a critically important program. There are agency programs, there's tax incentives, which we'll talk about later. But there's a lot. There's some other things that are available for us to consider.
And that's a great point, and I'm not sure if anybody has any kind of thoughts or opinions around where to apply. Part of it is, there's a lot of different fintech platforms. There's direct relationships with banks. Does anybody have any guidance on any specific either organizations or places and spaces where they should apply? Because I've heard in many cases, one bank may be giving a denial, one bank after the denial giving an approval. So there's, at least from what I've heard, not necessarily like a one way as opposed to different options and pathways.
I think you make a good point there, which is, you should definitely be not putting your eggs in one basket. Part of the reason why they're suspecting there is money available, that it hasn't run out in the way that they thought it would this time, is because there were duplicative loans. And so people were trying to, wherever they could to get the money, not sure what would happen with different institutions. And so that is definitely an approach that I would take.
I second that. And I also think that, I think a couple of things. I think some institutions are pushing through loans that others may not, because people are just taking more, like some institutions are taking more conservative approaches because they don't want to have any liability issues if for some reason the paperwork's not right. I think there are also, as I'm sure Tanya knows, there are a lot of discrepancies between the guidance that comes out versus this underlying statute. So the Treasury Department would come out and literally say that, they would change an interest rate, or they would change the term was originally for PPP 10 years, and then they came and said, no, it's 2. And so I think there are some institutions who feel like they could challenge what the Congress's intent was. So they are more aggressive and others are more conservative. The other thing I do think that a lot of us bank with really large banking institutions, and those guys were being overrun. I mean, they were just overwhelmed, and they were getting, 200,000 applications a day, like just insane amounts of incoming. And I think we don't bank with, Black banking institutions. We don't bank with smaller banks and regional banks and community banks. And those institutions were able to have conversations on the phone with their clients and say, what do you need? Let's figure out how to get you what you need. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and I know JP Morgan, who I love, and I have friends at Advancing Black Pathways, including, its head, Sekou Kalin, but it was much harder for them because they have so much incoming. And so I do think that, to me, a big lesson going forward is, like, who are your bank partners, or do you have multiple banking institutions that you have relationships with, so that if you need to kind of go smaller to get through faster, you have that ability. And I think a lot of us were really stuck in the line, and because we often get information late, we were at the back of the line. And while if we had maybe had an account also with, like a national, one of the minority depository institutions, like in New York, it's Carver, or in, DC, it's Industrial Bank of, Washington, we could have maybe tried to have another relationship to pursue our needs.
Yeah, no,
also is that we also have to start looking towards we're innovators, but we also have to look to the innovators out there. So how many of us actually bank with a newer fintech? Grasshopper Bank, who supports Black Women Talk Tech. Blue Vine, one of the main companies out here, who's a smaller fintech, who has been pushing through PP loans with not all the stress of the application with asking you for the minimal amount of items and getting back to you. Some people getting responses from them in a couple of hours. And you still not able, your application on one of the major institutions is still timing out. We're in COVID, I'm in New York City, so you can't really go to a branch and sit down with your banker. It's tough because, as Carmencita said, that there's, they're dealing with loads of people, they're probably dealing with millions of people. And so we slip through the cracks.
To that point, then, could you talk a little bit more about any alternative funding that either you looked at or you would recommend? Because part of this is not only stabilizing the business, but developing the right banking relationships so as you come out of this, you can have the right access. But we'd love to get some guidance and insight from you on any alternatives that you looked at that you may find to be viable for other folks.
I'm sorry, are you speaking to me? Because I'm frozen right now for some reason. So
yes, yes, okay. I am.
Yes. We can hear you now.
Okay, great. So what I actually looked into, instead of alternative funding, I really just thought about and dealt with clients and colleagues about actually taking this old school and really looking at how to increase your cash flow and utilizing the CARES Act to actually do that. So there were many items such as the PPP, the EIDL loan.
So she may just get refreshed back in. While we're waiting for her, part of what you want to take into consideration is making sure that before you apply, knowing what you want to use it for. So this is absolutely emergency funding, but you want to treat it as if, which you are, you're taking capital into your organization. So knowing where you need to apply it and then knowing what that's going to get you, because in reality, the funding availability is time, right? So generally for payroll, it's 2.5 months, and the thought process is that if we can get you 2.5 months, and that gives you additional time to either retool or look at pivoting, partner, etc. So while she's coming back in to give a little bit more tactical insight, please take into consideration what you want this money to do for your business, so that you set yourself up to be proactive as we get through, this moment, which is very easy to be reactive.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, and the other point is to make sure that what you're using it for is actually in compliance with what is forgivable. In the instance of PPP, one of the problems is that the guidance that the SBA has given has restricted the use of funds, and that affects what is in fact forgivable. So you want to make sure that you're not in a situation where you have used the funds and then turn out to have a loan that you have to pay back over time when you thought that it was, as you said before, free money as it was intended to be. That's actually something they're looking at right now, and it's probably likely to change based on just responses and things that we're hearing in DC. Since it wasn't really the intent of Congress. But something else to remember is that, these rules and guidance in this unprecedented time are quite fluid and change. So you have to really make sure you're keeping up with where things stand.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, that even as we both are following this, like I had to check on things this morning, like what's the latest, because like literally in an hour, it could be a completely different situation. So being able to keep up with the information is very difficult, but you've got to try so that, you're never in a situation where you have a loan that's forgivable that you no longer can use. You can no longer write it off or, get written off. I think the other thing is that it's really important also, I know we're here to talk about businesses, but there are also individuals who need to be taken care of at this time. There are a lot of startups that have one person working for the business, and you're kind of reinvesting your you're reinvesting your revenue back in the business. Maybe you give yourself a small distribution here and there, I think it's important that you also look at whether or not the PPP is really what's right for you. Sometimes you should really just consider unemployment. They've expanded it. As Tonya said in her opening, they really try to consider people who don't pay unemployment insurance, like sole proprietors and independent contractors. And that funding is gonna go longer. It's through July 31st. It's not 2.5 months, it's 4 months, where you're able to get the max benefit in your state. In New York, that's $504 a week, plus a federal bonus of $600. And that for 4 months may be much better for you than a PPP loan for half of the amount. So I think you gotta make sure that you stop and not necessarily follow kind of what everyone's doing, and really look at what's the right solution for you to solve your problems. Is it to get unemployment and use some of your money to put into your business to keep it going? Is it to get PPP because because that makes more sense for you? Or if obviously if you have employees, that's a different story. But I think you have to really look at all of the programs that are available to you. And I think, I think in that sense, go ahead. You can go ahead, Adam.
No, please.
I was just going to say that I also think that if you do have staff, it's important to think about like the payroll tax deferral. You would be able to take to because if you get the PPP loan, you still have to pay your payroll taxes. And for a lot of businesses, that's not an easy thing to keep up with sometimes, depending on the size of your team. And so I think you want to make sure that you are looking at the fact that you could defer some of that. If you don't get the if you get the PPP loan, you're able to defer your taxes until the period until the date of forgiveness. So that's an added benefit, that you don't have to pay those payroll taxes right away, and you can keep that PPP money. You can defer it until that forgiveness date. And if you don't get PPP because the money runs out, there's an employee retention tax credit where you could get up to $5,000 refundable almost immediately for your employees per employee. If you are short on cash and you need money right now, you have the ability to go to your retirement accounts. A lot of us are founders that used to work for companies, and we have our 401ks for work, after working 20 years somewhere, and that money's sitting there. And I know you don't want to touch it, but sometimes it's really hard to access it because you're under 59 and a half years old. So they've allowed you in the CARES Act to go out to be able to withdraw that money early. They're waiving that 10% penalty. They're giving you 3 years to pay that money back. There are just a number of other tax provisions and things in there that if you sat down and you mapped it out, you'd maybe able to figure out how do you still get some help, either immediately or long-term, to protect yourself.
I love this, and I think it's also just like the power of these really safe spaces and conversations, because oftentimes money brings anxiety in terms of conversations, and I think if anything, these moments cause us to be very real and because they're very visceral in terms of like the necessities for us to not only stabilize so we can survive, but prepare ourselves to thrive. And so I'm wondering, from your standpoint, for those of us who may have previously had anxieties around the numbers and getting the paperwork prepared, and just kind of, that preparedness to even, submit, right? Do you have any guidance around, should they reach out to accountants or look at different fintech platforms? Because it's not just about the now, it's the how am I operating my business after we get through this transitional period.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the first thing you said is spot on. Use your accountant, because they will help you stay in compliance. Use your accountant. When I applied for my PPP loan and when I talked to friends about it, I was like, call your accountant, because we want to make sure that a lot of these programs, as Tonya can tell you, they're relying on you providing the information, and they're relying on you to certify that everything is true. They're not necessarily checking all those numbers. And so you want to make sure that your certifications are correct, because they're not doing the math, you're doing the math. And so I think your accountant is going to be the one who helps you follow.
Oh, it doesn't work for my iPad? Okay, never mind.
And so I think it's important for you to use the accountant. And there's, look, it is overwhelming. And I think maybe Tani had referred to it, that there are different applications everywhere.
Oh,
there are different applications.
Hey, Tani.
Hi, Tani.
Hey, go ahead. You were finishing. You were talking about the applications.
I was just saying there are different applications everywhere. So I think if you can do a little research to figure out which ones are a little less cumbersome, and then you go that route. But I think your accountant, that's what they're there for, to help you through this time. You don't have to go it alone.
Yeah, and it's so important. I mean, the people that I know locally that have had trouble accessing the funds, it's because their paperwork wasn't in order. It wasn't ready to go. They didn't have the things because they didn't know, because they don't have these formal relationships. They've always done things on their own. They have pride, and should have, pride in having done it on their own. And so it's a double whammy when you feel like you've done your best, you've made some honest mistakes, you've tried to, when you've tried to correct them. And then in a time like this, when you desperately need help, having survived many other challenges, you're not eligible, or you don't have what you need to get the help that you deserve.
Absolutely. And Tanya, while you were gone, we were talking a little bit about some of the mechanics around PPA, alternative forms of financing, getting over that anxiety of getting your paperwork together to then stabilize. So would love to get some insight from you on, either your experience in terms of getting access to some of the alternative capital sources. And of course, there's the shameless plug, because I believe your platform also helps around some of the financial aspects as well.
Yeah. So the first thing, I know it's very difficult when we're starting businesses to, we're competing with these large companies that have a lot of money, and it can have a team of lawyers, a team of accountants, things like that. But there are a lot of resources and tools out there, including SaviMoni, which we are going into beta. So guys, sign up for beta. That can help you basically put your finances on autopilot. I think that, when I know for me many years ago, I always looked at it like, oh my gosh, like spreadsheet, get me out of spreadsheet hell kind of thing. But there's so much technology that can actually help you keep your finances in order, automated bookkeeping, et cetera, things like that. And I think that's the first step that we have to look at, just keeping things in order, making sure that we have some tools that we're using that are connected to all our accounts, and we're keeping records. That one also helps, if we do have an accountant, helps our accountant, because our accountants have skills that are better used for the money that you're going to invest in them than bookkeeping. So, and just as business people, we need to keep our books so we can understand our profits and our revenue. So now when we get in a situation like this, when the bank is asking us, or like the SBA loan, which a lot of people got stuck at, when they asked what your cost of goods sold were, people freaked out. They were like, I don't know what this means. I don't understand how to do this. I don't know. And if you were a service provider, then it may not even have applied to you. But you didn't know that because you weren't keeping up, and there weren't things, you didn't have the things necessary. So I think that's one of the first steps. And, just as I was saying earlier, just like if we have those things in place, then when we're going to reach out to all these, we're going to reach out to these banks and ask them for this, or any type of, even private lenders, even for us, for those of us who are trying to raise funds, and we're going to meet with angels and, VCs, you have to have financial modeling. You have to have that in place. So if you have financial modeling, those things in place, it makes it much easier when we are presented with issues like this. Now, I know that Black Women Talk Tech, as a founder member with Black Women Talk Tech, there are a lot of pro bono services that we need to take advantage of. legal pro bono services. There may be financial and other software services that are pro bono or highly discounted that we need to invest in. That helps us to be prepared. And really knowing your numbers and knowing where your business stands will help you decide if you should apply for the PPP loan or the EIDL, both or none at all. Because you have to go into this with a strategy. I think a lot of the information that was going around was just like free money. I think the biggest mistake the government made was the stimulus check first, because then after that, everybody thought that you were going to get free money everywhere. And it was just like, first of all, the stimulus check is not free money, but that's a whole nother panel. But, it's not, it's not free. You have to repay it. And even though the interest rates are amazing, as Tanya said earlier, or maybe it's Carmencita, started at 10 years and then it went to 2 years. 2 years is not a long time for a business to repay that. So you really have to know what you're getting yourself into, because as we know, Uncle Sam collects his debts no matter what. So they will come and get that money from you, and you don't want to be in a position, you don't want to put yourself in, in a really worse position than we kind of already are. So, yeah.
So what we're going to do, while we get into the last couple questions, I want to be able to make sure we open it up for the Q&A. One of the first questions that I saw in the chat was around contractors. I'm not sure if anybody has any insights around that, for companies that do use contractors. One, if the PPP would be applicable in that sense. And if not, any options or insight you could share with folks that primarily depend on contractors.
So I'll just say this, since this is kind of my wheelhouse. SaviMoni works specifically with, what the government calls sole proprietors or the self-employed. So one of the provisions and one of the unprecedented things that happen is that there are a lot of benefits that are going to be passed down to sole proprietors and independent contractors, 1099 workers, etc. And if you own a company and you use them and you are using them as employees, and you'd like to apply for the EIDL or the PPP, you have to be very mindful because there are provisions that they have to apply for themselves. So one thing about the PPP, as an independent contractor, you can apply for yourself if you are an independent contractor or a sole proprietor. And therefore, if you hire 1099 workers, they have to apply for themselves. You can only apply for W-2 employees in the case of the PPP loan. So people have to be very mindful of that information. And they will request things such as a Form 91 to look at your payroll taxes. They're going to request to see your payroll taxes. And when it's time to get it forgiven or pay it back, I'm pretty sure they're going to be asking that to verify that you actually use the funds for payroll. So that's what you want to think. I think that if you are a company that uses independent contractors, then the EIDL might be a better option for you, depending on your situation. Again, you have to go, look at your finances. It might be a better option for you. But if you are specifically looking to get it forgiven and turned into a grant, and that's why you want to go after PPP, you would have to apply as a sole proprietor.
But remember, the EIDL program has no more money.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's not really an option anymore for you.
Right.
And I do think that one of the more unfortunate things that the Treasury Department did in developing their guidance was saying that 1099 employees would not count towards your payroll number, because that is not what the law that was actually passed by Congress says. Mm-hmm. And so a business who relies on 1099 workers and they still want to keep their business going and keep people working, it completely negates that when you tell it pretty much shuts your business down, because you're now telling the 1099 employee you can go get your own money and they can't work because they can't, at that point you can't hire them. You have no money to hire them anymore. So they're getting money for the PPP, but they're not working anymore. And so that was, definitely guidance that really didn't make sense. And I find it very unfortunate, because if a 1099 employee can go and get unemployment, then that should be the way that they get money. And then the 1099 employee that works on your team can continue working for you. I really hope that's something that will get resolved in the next CARES Act 2.0, because I think it's clear to, look, I worked in the government, Tonya worked in the government, and what we know for sure is that a lot of people are promulgating laws without having ever worked in the private sector or run a business. And so they really are not necessarily making decisions that are practical for a business. Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there on that. I'm like, what's going to happen to these sectors of businesses? It seems like there's not enough representation or people who have a very good understanding. Often what happens is everyone gets grouped into this one thing, and it's like, okay, it's a monolith. This applies for everyone, and it doesn't. So it becomes very difficult to navigate these things. And another reason why I often told founders and clients, like, I know we're rushing and we need to be at the front of the line, but you need to take time to really sort through this information and make sure, again, you know what you're getting yourself into. You really need to sort through this. And especially just the way it was started, it keeps changing, which I think is very scary in itself, because you apply, you get approved, and then there's an amendment. There's new legislation. It gets confusing. What's going to happen to us at the end, and I'm sure that's what you'll be lobbying about, but what's going to happen to us at the end when it finally all comes together and maybe we didn't qualify somehow. Now we are indebted for this loan that we really can't afford. So we're not as well off as we were when it all started.
And I think one way to try to, one way is, so some law firms, including mine, they have they have clinics where you have like associates working. So they're not partners. They can charge either a flat rate, or they're charging, you could negotiate some sort of smaller amount where they can kind of advise you maybe every time a bill comes out. Obviously, it's hard to keep up with every FAQ and every guidance that's released, but you can maybe decide, like, I can spend $200, a month, or whatever that amount is, in order to make sure I have all of the information I possibly need. And then you also can be added to their list, so that when they're sending out daily alerts on those updates, then you're getting them kind of in like a very plain English, short description. And I think that's something that a lot of people are doing, large businesses are doing, and it's not a lot of us that are a part of those, that are part of that. And so I think, maybe it's finding a law firm that's able to kind of advise you on a little bit through their clinic, and then getting on their list so that you're receiving the alerts, as a way to like make sure daily you're getting what all those daily updates are that are coming out from Congress. And if you have any friends that are lawyers, that are at a law firm, that are working on CARES, call your friend and say, put me on that list. Can you get me on the list? Because I know I've tried to put, some of my friends on the list so that they're in a position to follow and get, to see. And also you can go to any major law firm, Google, or go on their website. They post their alerts. So you don't even need to be on the list. When I think about it, all you have to do is like look at some of the major law firms, obviously we're Brownstein Hyatt, you have Denson, you have Aiken Gump, you have all these firms they're putting out daily alerts with updates, and go on their list and pick one law firm and follow it on a daily basis to see what's coming out and what could be available for you.
There's one other,
so Tani,
add a point to that. There's one other I wanted to add just to that. Trade associations. If you have any friends that are members of trade associations, large ones like the Chamber of Commerce, which I know they're not always great, but for business, even business people, they're trying to keep their members informed. But other ones, that they're putting out daily guidance, they're putting out dashboards that have, links to the different agencies and things that you were talking about there that make it very easy for you to hone in on what's happened, recently, so that you can keep yourself informed.
So Tanya, you have a unique experience in being both, well, I guess the three sides: public sector, private sector, and also the philanthropic sector as well. So what's some of what you see in terms of us getting through this transitional period of, government support into some level of stabilization? Do you have any, kind of thoughts around the outlook or anything that can kind of be helpful to us as we all kind of navigate this together?
Yeah, I think one thing I just wanted to underscore is, I know everyone is focused on managing their business in the day-to-day, but there's something that's really underlying in all this, and that is getting in front of legislation, right? So making sure that that your perspective, that your business, that your sector, that folks know and understand what differentiates you. And that is a long-term process, which involves, creating relationships, telling your story, making sure that you have data and facts to present, to back up what you're saying, so that, and also talking to people who aren't just, like you. So not just, in my instance, it would be Democrats, not just, African-American, members and policymakers, but trying to help folks understand, the uniqueness of your situation. So when something like this happens, you have someone to go to, you have someone to talk to. This is just a crazy situation that moved so fast, and it's just hard to say who was able to have influence, especially when people weren't even at the Capitol. But I think that's something that's really important, and it's something that I know that this organization is working towards, and making sure that your voice is being heard in the crafting of the legislation, so that you're not shut out on the back end.
And I guess given that, then have we been vocal enough, and as it relates to just our own individual experiences and our collective needs? Or is trying to essentially, do you feel is that a call to action, or do we need to kind of wait and see what happens with this next round?
I would say it's a call to action. It's always necessary. It's hard to say that you can do enough of it. It is very true that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The people who people were talking about, the Kennedy Center. How in the world did the Kennedy Center get into, the legislation to, get monies, when businesses are failing? It's because there are people who members who, for them, that is a priority. And you have to remember, this is all a part of a negotiation. Lots of parts and pieces, people coming in with different members and groups with their priorities, and you have to be in line. They have to know that you exist. They have to know and understand what, how policies are likely to affect you. And the best way to do that is to have someone that you can call, or have, either individually or collectively through your organization, so that you're not shut out or hurt in an unintended way, which is really difficult to turn around, once it's in the law. Having enough trouble with just implementation with federal agencies, doing things that are different than what the law actually says. But I think that's really important.
I agree. And I think back to something you said earlier, Tanya, I think you, would it be great for us to have like an agenda for, Black women? But that also would be difficult because we all have different priorities and our businesses are in different sectors and our needs are different. I do think what you could do, but I'm not saying that shouldn't be something we dream and maybe work towards, but I do think today, if for your specific industry, I think you need to try to find your trade association. Try to figure out who the trade association is for your industry. I think even going to them, and because sometimes they have a different price for membership for smaller companies. And I think you can even maybe try to negotiate with them to say, can I pay over time, or can I have like a free first year or whatever, to try to figure out a way to get in if money is a problem for the membership. Because I think through those organizations, we should seek a seat at the table to be a part of those discussions. Those trade associations have like their what they call fly-in days, where they go to Washington and they go and they lobby like all the offices, across the House and the Senate. And that's a way for you to start to build relationships. You can follow up with the staff that you meet with. And when something like this happens, you're able to send a note and say, hey, this is a thing I'm seeing happening, on the street that I don't know if you're aware of, and this is a problem. Or I have a solution to a problem I see that you're dealing with. And you offer some solutions. So I do think that today already you can have a voice through some of these organizations today. And so whatever it is, if you're like they have a trade association for people who produce specialty crops. They have an association for people who make chocolate. They have an association for the fashion industry. They have trade associations for everything. Find those associations, join them, be active, be a part of their like government relations committee, and start to raise your voice, because there are not a lot of us who are in these discussions and in these rooms.
So we've got 5 more minutes, and so I wanted to allow the 3 of you to share some parting words. Before I do so, just wanted to elevate one thing. So just so everybody knows, although we've been through this before, these are unprecedented times. We won't get through this because this has happened before. Essence, Lit Bar, Plum Perfect, Glossier, all these companies were founded during recessions. So, with every obstacle is an opportunity, and we're incredibly grateful to be able to, impart these this dialogue and these conversations, but just know that you matter, your businesses matter, and we will do everything that we can in order to help elevate you. So with that, I want to allow our panelists to share any parting words, insights, or inspiration.
I'm happy to start. I would just say that if there's one thing positive in this, it is tech has been at the forefront of figuring out, providing solutions. And going forward, I feel like there's a new appreciation for what emerging technologies can do, whether people are looking for efficiencies, whether they're looking for, just, again, alternatives. There is that's who the government has been turning to. And so there's a real opportunity in this for founders, for aspiring founders, to really take advantage of that and to pay attention and, make sure you're, keeping up with and looking at, how things are evolving. It's just been incredible to me, as working with portfolio companies, and talking with, government officials, how desperate they are for these solutions. And if you know what's going on, you can be a part of crafting those solutions. And it's just a different day. And so I think that that's a good thing. That's a positive thing to look forward to.
So, sorry. So I'll jump in as someone who's more in the private sector and looking at it from that perspective. The first thing I want to say is that remember that you're not in this alone. Everyone has a stake in your success. So this is exactly why the CARES Act was initiated, because they need us as businesses, and we, as was said before, small businesses. It's such a broad interpretation, but I like to call us micro businesses. Some of us micro businesses. They need us to sustain this economy. So we're not in this alone. There are a lot of other people who are going through this with us, and we need to turn to those people and help each other. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say, just going back to using your voice, I believe in starting local. It's important that we understand. I think me being in New York City, I am on the people who represent me are in my phone. Their phone number is in my phone. And that is because, no offense to anyone I don't look at them as celebrities. They are civil servants. They're here. I put them there to address my needs. This is not something you should be navigating alone. You should definitely be going to every part, starting local, and telling them what you're going through and what's not happening, because they are our voice in this thing. The third thing is just from a financial perspective, take the time right now to really start to get your affairs in order for your business. Really understand where your business is financially and how this is going to affect you. And don't be afraid to pivot. Don't hold on to something that after this pandemic might not be viable. That is a real thing. So we have to be open as founders to look at what is next, what's going to happen after this. How can we take what we have in our business? Because if we're not serving or meeting that need anymore or temporarily during this pandemic, it doesn't mean that all is lost. You still have an audience who has other issues that you may be able to solve. You still have whatever tools or services that you offer that may be able to serve another audience. You may discover a problem that you can solve that is way outside of your wheelhouse or what you're doing right now. Don't be afraid to take those next steps and move forward. And then lastly, visit SaviMoni.com.
Support Black business.
Yes. Support Black business. Visit SaviMoni.com. We have our own stimulus guide there. Sign up for our email list. We're going to be updating tonight and apparently for the rest of the week with this 1,800 page new part of the CARES Act that just came out. So we, just make sure you go over there, sign up, check out what we have. You can email me directly, Tani at SaviMoni.com. If you have questions or in social media, I'll be more than glad to help. I want to make sure that we get through this somehow and anyhow. Okay. Thanks for having me.
Amazing.
I'll keep it quick. I know we're at time now. I just want to say that, I am a founder. So I am you, and even though I'm able to still do my work in Washington, I have a staff and a team that I have to take care of that I'm concerned about every day. So I'm going through exactly the same things that you're going through and making the very same considerations. And so I would say, again, to look at the universe of options that are available to you beyond PPP, look at the tax provisions. One of the provisions we got done was the 5-year NOL carryback, where you're able to go back 5 years and take losses 5 years back. And that's, again, another check that the IRS can send to you right now. So just think about you try to take the time to figure out the other things in the bill that can help you. And if you look at it together as a package, it can even be worth more to you than even one PPP loan. I think that one program starts rolling around and everyone was like, that's the target. But there are a lot of other people who understand how to play this game that are making a lot of different calculations, and they're monitoring how do you go from one program to the next. How do you make sure you use one thing for this time frame, but you don't trigger anything that's going to create compliance issues for you? I think just try to take advantage of other people's resources as much as possible to help you, so that you don't have to pay for everything, but you're in the know and you're fully educated. And the bill, just so you know, just so you don't get excited that there's more money coming tomorrow, the bill that dropped today is only a Democratic message bill, to be honest. The Republicans are not right now playing ball with that bill. So this is going to be a couple more weeks before whatever this next bill is going to be. After this, there's probably not going to be a lot of help coming because the Republicans don't want to give money anymore. So we've got to pray and hope that whatever's in this bill has something for us to maintain us for a little while. And then I think there will be efforts to talk about recovery in the future. And that's why I think you've got to become a member of some of these trade associations. When they start to develop the recovery bill, where they start looking forward and thinking about the future so that you're a part of those discussions. Get to the table and go right now through some of these trade associations. And I'm really glad that I could be here today, and I'm a resource if you need me. I will tell you, visit our website, www.ofwhonder.com. But I'm also here through Black Women Talk Tech if you have any questions.
Amazing, amazing. You all, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be part of this panel. A wealth of information that is shared. Hopefully it's been helpful to everybody. And if you feel comfortable with being in contact, feel free to put your information in the chat. Again, to the Black Women Talk Tech team and family, we appreciate you for creating this space for so many folks, and stay safe and be healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.